Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, the name itself is just synonymous with some of the most horrific crimes you can even imagine. But behind all the headlines, there's a story that's not just about one deeply disturbed man. It's also about the catastrophic, systemic failures that allowed him to get away with it for so long. So today, we're going to try to unpack the whole picture.
So, where do you even begin a story like this? Well, we're not going to start at the beginning. We're going to start at the very end, inside an apartment that had become a tomb where the full, sickening scope of his crimes was finally revealed.
Okay, so the date is July 22nd, 1991. It's a hot summer night in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. For years, this quiet, unassuming man had been operating completely in the shadows. But on this night, all of those shadows were about to be dragged kicking and screaming into the light.
And it all unraveled because of one man, Tracy Edwards. He managed to do what so many others tragically could not. He escaped. He runs out into the street, flags down a police car, one handcuff still dangling from his wrist, and he leads them right back to the apartment of the man who had just tried to kill him.
When those officers stepped inside, they were met with a scene that was just unimaginable. The air was thick with this chemical, rotting stench, and the things they found, it was beyond comprehension. Polaroids of dismembered victims, severed heads just sitting in the fridge, and these huge barrels of acid filled with what was left of human beings. This wasn't just a murder scene, it was a personal museum of death.
So the question is, how does a person become capable of something like this? To even begin to understand, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to a seemingly normal childhood that slowly, insidiously, curdled into something monstrous. Jeffrey Dahmer was born into a home that was just simmering with tension. His mother struggled with some really severe mental health issues, and his parents' marriage was just in this state of constant conflict. And as a kid, he grew up just absorbing all of that chaos, feeling more and more isolated. And you can trace this really clear, chilling progression through his early years. He apparently went from a happy kid to a withdrawn, detached little boy right after a surgery around age 4. By the time he's a preteen, that detachment had morphed into this dark fascination with roadkill and dissection, and this whole path just culminates in his first murder at just 18 years old. In high school, the warning signs were flashing bright red, but nobody connected the dots. He was a severe alcoholic, drinking constantly, even in class. He got known for these bizarre, disruptive pranks, so much so that his classmates had a name for it, doing a Dahmer. He was just seen as that strange outcast, but never as a real danger.
His first murder, that was the moment of no return. It's 1978, he picks up a young hitchhiker, Stephen Hicks. And when Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer's intense, deep-seated fear of abandonment just completely took over. He killed him, he dismembered the body, and right there, in that one single act, he established the horrifying blueprint for every single murder that would follow.
After a failed stint in the army and kind of drifting for a few years, Dahmer's dark compulsions really took full control. He settles back in Milwaukee, and that's where his violent fantasies would escalate into an absolutely horrifying spree.
17. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's the total number of young men and boys that Jeffrey Dahmer murdered between 1978 and 1991. 17 lives just stolen. 17 families completely destroyed. And his method was chillingly consistent. He would lure men, often from gay bars or bus stops, back to his apartment. He'd drug them, strangle them, and then the real horror would begin. He would dismember their bodies and keep parts, skulls, bones, as trophies. He was trying to create a permanent collection from the people he killed. This quote right here, it really gets to the core of his twisted logic. He practiced cannibalism, and he explained it as a way to absorb his victims, to literally make them a part of him so that he would never, ever be alone. It was the ultimate twisted act of possession and control. And if you can believe it, it gets even more disturbing. He actually tried to create what he called a zombie, a living, breathing partner who would be completely subservient. He would drill holes into his victims' skulls and pour in acid, all in this desperate, gruesome attempt to manufacture a companion who could never abandon him. So that brings us back to 1991. With Dahmer finally in custody, the whole world just watched as the justice system tried to grapple with how to prosecute a man whose crimes seemed to just defy human understanding.
So, the big question at the trial was he legally insane? His defense team argued he was, that he was driven by these compulsions he just couldn't control. But the prosecution, they painted a very different picture. A methodical, calculating killer who knew exactly that what he was doing was wrong. In the end, the jury agreed with the prosecution. They found him sane and fully responsible for his actions.
The sentence was just overwhelming. For his 15 murders in Wisconsin and the one in Ohio, Dahmer received 16 life sentences, which totaled more than 900 years in prison. There was absolutely no doubt he was going to die behind bars.
But his time in prison was actually pretty short and strange. He was this notorious figure, and there were reports of him taunting guards and other inmates by making his food look like body parts. Then, on November 28, 1994, just a little over 2 years into his sentence, a fellow inmate named Christopher Scarver beat him to death with a metal bar.
But Dahmer's death, that's not really the end of the story, is it? His case left this deep, deep scar, and it forced society to confront some really uncomfortable truths about who it protects and who it ignores.
This right here, this is probably the most damning failure of all. Just 2 months before he was caught, police were called because a 14-year-old boy, Konarak Sinthasampan, had escaped. Dahmer managed to convince the officers it was just a lover's quarrel between two adults. They believed him, and they handed the boy back. Konarak was killed that night.
In that incident, it reveals a devastating pattern. Dahmer preyed on the vulnerable. The vast majority of his victims were young, gay men of color, people whose disappearances at that time were much less likely to trigger a massive police response. Their marginalization gave him cover to keep killing.
So the crucial point here is this. The Dahmer case became so much more than just a story about a serial killer. It became a story about prejudice, about police negligence, and about a system that completely failed to protect some of its most vulnerable citizens.
And that leaves us with a question that still haunts us today. Dahmer wasn't some cartoon villain hiding in the shadows. He was the quiet neighbor, the awkward coworker. So how does an ordinary face hide such a monster? And maybe more importantly, what does that say about the evil that can exist, totally unnoticed, right next door?